Welcome back to Rapture Tales. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get ready for another story you won't forget. Let's dive back to the story. Miriam Cole grew up in a quiet suburban town where love felt like something distant but deeply craved. Her childhood was shaped by her mother's gentle discipline and her father's silence, the kind that carried unspoken expectations. She learned early to be responsible, mature, and self-reliant. Yet beneath her calm smile lived a girl with dreams far larger than anyone suspected, dreams of a warm home, a stable marriage, and children who would never feel the emptiness she once felt. Miriam believed fiercely in loyalty and kindness, even when life bruised her confidence. Her compassionate nature made her a magnet for people with broken edges, and she always tried to fix what wasn't hers to fix. As she stepped into adulthood, she worked tirelessly at a hotel to support herself, often sacrificing personal joys for bills and responsibilities. She wasn't wealthy, but her dignity was priceless. Her soft-spoken charm and diligence caught many eyes, yet she remained guarded, waiting for someone who felt safe enough to love. She had no idea her life was about to be entangled with a man whose shadows ran deeper than she could imagine. Caleb Blake would walk into her world like a spark, igniting both hope and destruction. Caleb Blake's past was a long corridor of secrets, marked by survival rather than morality. Growing up in a chaotic home shaped his heart into something sharp, teaching him that manipulation paid faster than honesty. By the time he was in his 20s, he had mastered the art of calculated charm, dangerously persuasive, effortlessly confident, and capable of making lies sound like poetry. His early ventures into fraudulent schemes gave him quick money and an illusion of power. The thrill of deceit became an addiction he justified as doing what he must to survive. Even as his crimes expanded, Caleb refined a public persona that masked every flaw. Handsome, smooth-tongued, and impeccably dressed, he moved through life like someone born for success. Underneath, however, was a man incapable of real affection, a man who viewed relationships as opportunities rather than commitments. When he crossed paths with Miriam, he saw her purity not as something to honor, but as something to exploit. Yet even he didn't anticipate how deeply she would affect him, and how her quiet strength would one day shatter everything he built. Their meeting happened on a rainy evening at the hotel, where Miriam worked the front desk. Caleb walked in drenched but confident, wearing a mischievous smile that made her heart flutter against her will. He teased her gently about the weather, making her laugh despite her exhaustion. For the first time in a long while, someone made her feel seen rather than overlooked. Miriam felt drawn to him. His confidence felt like warmth, his presence electric. She couldn't have guessed that the charm he wrapped around her was a well-practiced routine. Caleb, on the other hand, was intrigued not just by her beauty, but by the innocence she carried so naturally. He sensed she was the kind of woman who loved sincerely, the kind who trusted wholeheartedly. That made her perfect for his long-term plans. In her shy smiles and genuine concern, he found an easy target for emotional manipulation. Yet in the back of his mind, a small, unfamiliar feeling stirred, one he immediately buried. To him, love was weakness, and weakness had no place in his world. Caleb intensified his pursuit, showering Miriam with attention she had never experienced. He brought flowers to the hotel, waited outside during her breaks, and spoke about dreams that sounded sweet but hollow. Miriam, starved of affection, believed every word. His lies were beautifully crafted, stories of ambition, growth, and stability that painted him as a man striving for a better life. He studied her reactions carefully, adjusting his approach to win more of her heart. To Miriam, he seemed like everything she'd always prayed for. Slowly, her guard crumbled. She found herself allowing him into her world, introducing him to the pieces of her life she rarely shared with anyone. Caleb's ability to mirror her values made him irresistible. When he finally confessed his feelings, she believed every syllable. She saw in him not the red flags waving boldly, but the potential she wished he had. Her love was pure, blind, and all-consuming. His was strategic. Their wedding took place abroad, a small event Caleb insisted would be more intimate. Miriam accepted it gladly, unaware he simply wanted fewer witnesses and fewer people questioning his past. She wore a simple but elegant gown, radiating hope. Caleb looked charming as always, playing the role of devoted husband with award-winning precision. To everyone present, they looked blissfully in love, but Miriam was the only one who truly felt it. Caleb's smiles were calculated, his vows practiced the night before. After the ceremony, Miriam held his hands tightly, believing they were stepping into a lifelong union built on trust and shared dreams. Caleb saw it differently. To him, marriage was an anchor he could use, someone loyal at home while he expanded his hidden empire. Even so, there were fleeting moments when her tenderness disarmed him. Sometimes, late at night, he found himself wondering why her innocence unsettled him so deeply. The first cracks appeared when Caleb's temperament shifted. He grew irritable, snapping over small issues and disappearing for days without explanation. Miriam tried to be patient, telling herself marriage required endurance. But the man she married no longer resembled the charming lover she fell for. He guarded his phone like a treasure chest and locked financial documents away from her. His business trips increased, and each return came with a coldness she couldn't decode. Miriam felt the weight of loneliness pressing harder each day. She tried to talk, to reconnect, but Caleb dismissed her concerns or accused her of overthinking. She refused to believe their marriage was crumbling this soon. Instead, she blamed herself, wondering if she wasn't doing enough or loving him right. Her heart ached, but she held on to hope, unaware that Caleb's secret world was expanding faster than she imagined. Caleb's fraudulent empire grew into a dangerous network, pulling in large sums through identity theft, fake investments, and elaborate scams. With more money came more arrogance. He bought luxury cars, rented penthouses, and mingled with questionable partners like Marcus Lowell. Miriam watched him transform into a stranger, one too drunk on power to care about consequences. Caleb felt untouchable, convinced no one could expose him. As his empire expanded, he became less cautious at home. He returned late smelling of expensive perfume, carried wads of cash he refused to explain, and frequently dismissed Miriam's questions with irritation. The marriage he once pretended to cherish became an inconvenience. Miriam's intuition screamed at her, but her hope for a child and a stable home kept her silent. She clung to the fragments of love she believed still existed somewhere in him. The burden of childlessness began choking Miriam's soul. She visited hospitals secretly, hoping for answers, but all tests said she was perfectly healthy. Caleb never accompanied her, often mocking her efforts or calling them unnecessary. His coldness made her desperation heavier. Miriam spent sleepless nights crying quietly beside him, wishing she could understand what went wrong. Her longing for motherhood became a wound that never closed. At work, she hid her pain behind forced smiles. Sophie Langston, her closest friend, noticed the sadness Miriam tried to mask. She encouraged her to seek emotional support, but Miriam didn't want to burden anyone. She believed that if she stayed kind, patient, and faithful, maybe life and Caleb would reward her someday. That hope blinded her to the storm brewing. Vanessa Cruz entered Caleb's life like gasoline meeting fire. Bold, seductive, and hungry for luxury, she became obsessed with him from the moment they exchanged glances at a business lounge. Caleb, attracted to her confidence and recklessness, saw her as a perfect accessory to his lifestyle. Their flirtation escalated rapidly into a public affair, something he no longer bothered hiding. Vanessa knew he was married but didn't care. She bragged to friends about stealing a man trapped with a boring wife. To Caleb, she represented excitement, something Miriam's gentle nature couldn't compete with in his corrupted mind. He showered Vanessa with gifts bought from stolen money, while Miriam struggled at home, trying to hold on to a marriage that was already sinking. The truth hit Miriam one evening when Caleb returned home reeking of Vanessa's perfume. She confronted him, shaking with fear and heartbreak. Instead of remorse, he exploded angrily, accusing her of spying and nagging. When she asked if he loved Vanessa, he delivered a blow she never expected. He blamed her for being barren, insisting that a man like him deserved children and a real woman. His cruelty shattered her spirit. Miriam broke down, unable to fathom how the man who once promised her forever could now speak with such venom. She realized she had been loving alone all this time, but still, a part of her held on to hope that this was anger speaking, not truth. She didn't yet know that the worst betrayal was still on its way. New Year's Day arrived with fireworks. But inside their home, a different kind of explosion unfolded. Caleb, fueled by Vanessa's influence and his own arrogance, humiliated Miriam in front of neighbors during a heated argument. He shouted that she was a burden, a barren woman wasting his time. Before anyone could intervene, he dragged her suitcase out and threw it at her feet. He ordered her to leave and never come back. Miriam stood paralyzed, tears mixing with the cold night air. Every dream she'd built with him crumbled in an instant, though shattered. She walked away slowly, dignity trembling but intact. Behind her, Caleb slammed the door, believing he had finally freed himself from the woman he never valued. He didn't know that fate was already moving pieces that would bring him to his knees. With nowhere to go, Miriam started over from scratch. She rented a small room, took extra shifts at work, and leaned on Sophie for emotional support. It was a painful, lonely season, but it forced her to rediscover her strength. The silence away from Caleb allowed her to breathe again, even as her heart mourned the death of her marriage. Slowly, she rebuilt her confidence, learning to prioritize her own peace. Though life was still hard, she found solace in small victories, cooking simple meals, reading again, and walking the evenings without fear of being yelled at. Miriam realized that leaving Caleb wasn't a tragedy. It was salvation disguised as heartbreak. She had no idea her next discovery would change everything. Weeks later, Miriam fainted during work and was rushed to the hospital. Dr. Eleanor Matthews delivered news she'd never expected. She was pregnant, not with one child but twins. Shock rippled through her, followed by fear and overwhelming relief. The man who called her Barren had been wrong all along. Her tears flowed freely, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from gratitude. She made the brave decision to leave the country quietly, determined to raise her babies far from Caleb's toxicity. She refused to let him destroy the little lives growing within her. For the first time in years, she felt purposeful again. Her journey toward motherhood had begun, even if she had to walk it alone. Life abroad was challenging but peaceful. Miriam balanced 2 jobs while preparing for the twins' arrival. She met kind strangers who became friends, forming a small community that embraced her warmly. When Aiden and Ava were born, her life transformed into a beautiful chaos of sleepless nights, tender moments, and overwhelming love. The twins became her strength, her joy, and her proof that God's timing was perfect. Watching them grow brightened every corner of her soul. Their laughter healed wounds she thought would last forever. Over the years, Miriam built a stable life, modest but filled with love. She finally understood that family wasn't defined by perfection, but by presence. Meanwhile, Caleb's world was silently decaying. Back home, Caleb and Vanessa planned a grand wedding dripping with luxury. Caleb wanted the world to see how successful he was. Vanessa wanted attention. But deep down, Caleb still felt bruised by how quietly Miriam disappeared. To stroke his ego, he sent her a wedding invitation, fully expecting she'd be too broken to show up. He wanted to mock her, prove she had lost, prove she was nothing without him. What he didn't know was that Miriam had evolved into a woman far stronger than the one he tossed aside. The invitation didn't break her. It awakened a calm fire within her. She decided to attend, not out of spite, but to face the past with the dignity she gained. When Miriam stepped into the wedding hall, all heads turned. She looked breathtaking in a simple, elegant gown, her confidence glowing through her calm expression. Vanessa's smile froze instantly. Caleb's jaw dropped. He had expected a broken woman, not the radiant queen who stood before him. Whispers filled the hall as guests recognized her. Miriam walked gracefully, unaffected by the stares. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. Vanessa felt threatened, and Caleb felt something he never expected, regret. Miriam didn't come to reclaim anything. She came to show that she survived, that she healed, that she no longer lived in his shadow. The moment Aiden and Ava entered the hall, everyone gasped. Their resemblance to Caleb was undeniable. Same eyes, same jawline, same aura. Conversations erupted instantly. Vanessa's face paled, while Caleb staggered forward in disbelief. The truth hit him like a tidal wave. These were his children, the children he claimed Miriam could never conceive. Miriam quietly placed a protective hand on each twin, standing tall. Caleb realized the sins had manifested in the most humiliating way. Vanessa glared at him, feeling betrayed and threatened, sensing their perfect facade collapsing. Guests began questioning Caleb loudly, turning the wedding into chaos. Caleb pulled Miriam aside, his voice trembling. For the first time in his life, he begged. He pleaded to be part of the children's lives, swearing he had changed, swearing he needed her. But Miriam looked at him with calm eyes that held no bitterness, only closure. She told him the truth he never imagined hearing. Yes, they are yours, but you lost the right to call them yours the day you threw me away. Her words cut deeper than any blade. She walked away before he could speak again, leaving him with the ruins of his choices. Caleb stood frozen, unable to believe the one woman he underestimated now held all the power he once abused. Before the wedding could fully collapse, police sirens blared outside. Detective Raymond Pierce entered with a full team, presenting warrants tied to Caleb's long trail of fraud and money laundering. Guests watched in shock as officers began seizing documents, devices, and arresting Caleb's associates. Vanessa tried to escape, but officers cornered her too. Caleb was handcuffed in front of everyone, his empire crumbling within minutes. Miriam stood in the background, holding her twins, watching the justice she never sought unfold naturally. Caleb screamed her name, begging for help, claiming she was the only one who could save him. But Miriam knew this downfall was not her burden. It was simply consequences catching up. With the chaos behind her, Miriam left the venue, stepping into the sunlight with Aiden and Ava beside her. She didn't look back. Her future was no longer tied to pain, betrayal, or broken promises. She built a new life in strength, truth, and love, one where her children would grow knowing their mother chose peace over chaos. As she walked forward, Miriam felt whole. She had risen above everything meant to break her. Caleb's world collapsed, but hers had just begun. Her story was no longer one of abandonment. It was one of triumph, resilience, and rebirth. That's all for today. Like, subscribe, and see you in the next episode. Stay tuned.